The Many Saints of Newark is not a bad movie.
I don't know. Fucking slanderous me.
That's my opinion. So today, I'm going to talk about why I think this movie is a good movie, how I think it honors The Sopranos. I'm going to talk about all the complaints about the film, and I'm going to knock them all down one by one. These odd complaints about this movie. I found it entertaining. I really enjoyed it as a Sopranos fan. So let's just get right into it.
Don't go into a fucking preamble. Just tell me what's on your mind.
The first complaint about the film is that fans wanted the film to be all about Tony as a kid and his experiences of being a kid and what led him to become what he became in The Sopranos. And the film does do that. In the later half of the film is mostly about Dickie Moltisanti, who becomes like Tony's dad in the film, like his father. But The Many Saints of Newark was never supposed to all be about Tony.
Then what's it all about? Why don't you illuminate me?
The film is about who made Tony Soprano, who influenced him to become what he became. That was the tagline of the poster. That's the tagline of the movie. That's the point of the movie. It's not all about Tony. It never was all supposed to be about Tony. And even the original Sopranos was never all about Tony. It was about Tony's family, the other gangsters, Junior, Bobby, Janice. You know, there's lots of Sopranos characters. So, Many Saints of Newark is also balancing all the characters together and jumbling them around and exploring all the characters just like how they did in the show. So how is that different? So it's in line with what The Sopranos is as a thing or whatever. Besides, we already saw Tony's arc. You know, as Chrissy explains in the original Sopranos, that every person has an arc.
It says in these movie writing books that every character has an arc. You understand?
We already saw Tony's whole arc of him in The Sopranos. And we even get to see flashbacks of him as a kid in The Sopranos itself. So we already know Tony's arc. We don't know Dickie Moltisanti's arc, the other gangsters from that time period, the other mobsters. I'm more interested in what they went through in the 60s as opposed to Tony. Another complaint about the film is that the film jumbles the story around, or it doesn't go in the order that would be more pleasing to a viewer or something like that. This is a very odd complaint, and I think it's a very minor one when you look at a film. It's strange that people think this is a big deal as a complaint. I don't get it. I think the film is fine the way it flows. Can it flow better in a better written manner? Yeah, sure. But it didn't bother me, and I wasn't like, oh, this is like horrible editing, and it should have flowed better as a film, so therefore the film's terrible. Like, I did not think that way at all. That's my opinion. The third major complaint about the film, and this one I will agree with, is that the film has a lot of characters in it that never appear in The Sopranos, like the black characters, which I thought were okay. They were decent characters. It was interesting to see what they did with these other Sopranos characters. The film is really about the riots that were going on at the time, the racial tension between the Italians and the blacks, which was, hinted at and mentioned in the original Sopranos. So it does feel like it's a part of the whole story of why people felt the way they felt at the time period, and it was kind of interesting. But I will agree that it is weird because it doesn't have exactly everything to do with the Italians, but it is still connected. The film is trying to portray this idea that blacks and Italians felt oppressed in the 1960s and that they have this common bond with one another, and all the complications that went on at the time, and all the ignorance that led to how people think today and stuff, and, it was, like, uncomfortable. But then again, there was stuff in the original Sopranos that was uncomfortable, including stuff about race. So that is fitting with The Sopranos, is it not? Was it too uncomfortable? At times, sure. But it is a film that is meant to be dated because we are traveling back in time, not forward. So we are in the 60s, right? So it does make sense. I mean, we all should have kind of knew what we were coming to see, right? One of the main characters in The Many Saints of Newark is this new black character who was okay, and I forgot what his name was. What I think they should have done was have this new character be the son of Massive Genius, who was really one of the few black characters in The Sopranos.
I do so love a good firearm in my hand. You people are all right. Godfather, I've seen that movie 200 times.
He was in there for like 2 or 3 episodes. Massive Genius in the original Sopranos had this argument, this conflict with Hesh about the rights to the old music, the rock and roll music and stuff, and he was involved with Christopher and Adriana and all that stuff. Because really, Massive Genius was this black character that was memorable, and people remembered him from The Sopranos. So if they made the black character in the new Many Saints of Newark the son of Massive Genius, then this would be acceptable. This would be a neat thing to throw into the film, which could have tied into the future of his conflict with Hesh and all that kind of stuff. Instead, it's just some random character that we'll never see again because, I don't know, there wasn't a sequel to this movie, although I guess they could have done that, but still, that's my idea. The next complaint is that the film retreads too many themes and stuff that happened in the original Sopranos, and the film doesn't seem or feel original enough as a new thing. And I totally disagree with that. It has its own unique story. Plus, when you think about The Sopranos, it ran for like 7 seasons, so how many more stories can you possibly come up with that haven't been done before? The Sopranos explored practically everything. Family life, the drama, everything. What I'm saying is that what people have said is that the references to the old Sopranos episodes were mentioned in The Many Saints of Newark. And some people found this irritating and distracting from the film, or, annoying nostalgia. And it's like, I loved that shit. I loved all those references. They were nods to the past, which we remember, and it's really cool, and it's amazing to see them all younger in the film. And most of the time, the references that you notice are reflective of what happens in the future. The stuff with Junior, etc. Like the scene where Junior falls in the rain is like when he falls in the shower and he says that line. That's a connection. That's a cool connection. It's not stupid. These are all awesome references. All these references are charming, and they're just there for enjoyment. They're not there to be irritating. I felt like the fans viewed The Many Saints in Newark, they hated it the same way Star Wars fans hated the Star Wars prequels. But you guys are not writing this movie. This is not your movie. This is David Chase's movie. This is his vision. You're not the ones that are supposed to be writing it and re-editing it and all this kind of stuff. You can, but it's his thing. It's not your thing. But, I mean, you know what I mean. Because the Star Wars prequels also referenced a lot of stuff that happened in the original trilogy as well. It was foreshadowing of the future. It's all part of the same series, so since it's part of the same saga, it makes sense that the past would be similar to what the future would become. It's foreshadowing, and that's good storytelling. It's meant to be enjoyable, not irritating. I felt like the nostalgia and the references to the original Sopranos made the film feel like it was part of the world of The Sopranos, and it reminded me why I loved The Sopranos. And yes, it made me want to re-watch The Sopranos. That's how I felt watching The Many Saints in Newark. Now here's the next thing that I've been really itching to talk about. This is the biggest complaint, really, about The Many Saints in Newark, is the age inconsistencies of Silvio, in particular, and Pussy. Well, I'm here to dispute that because I disagree with all of you. I don't think that Silvio and Tony are supposed to be the same age. So first let's talk about Sil, then we'll talk about Pussy. People complained and said that Silvio is supposed to be the same age as Tony. So when people saw Silvio in Many Saints, and he's much older than Tony, people said it didn't make any frickin' sense. And they're wrong. To prove this, look at the episode of The Sopranos where Silvio critiques Tony's, mannerisms or whatever, and he complains about him in the office. And Silvio says to Tony,
I know you since you were a kid, Tone.
I knew you since you were a kid, Tone. Yeah, he knew him since he was a kid. If he was the same age as Tony, Silvio in that scene would have said, I knew you since we were kids. He would have said that. But he didn't.
I know you since you were a kid, Tone.
Because Silvio was always meant to be older than Tony. He's meant to be an older generation than Tony. You can see that in The Sopranos itself. Silvio's mannerisms, even the way he does his haircut, that's the old haircut from the 1960s that was popular back then. The way he walks, the way he hunches over, his accent. I mean, they all have Italian mannerisms, classic stereotypes of the Italian mobsters in The Sopranos. So they all do that, and I get that. But Silvio was always like the most stereotypical, I felt, of all of them. And that's another complaint, is that people thought they didn't like the actor who portrayed Silvio in the Many Saints of Newark movie because they said that he was way too stereotypical. The problem with that complaint is that all the Sopranos characters were all super stereotypical. That was the point. All of them were like stereotypical. So people complained, and they also said the actor who played Silvio in Newark felt like a caricature, like way too much of a caricature. But Silvio himself in The Sopranos was already a caricature. So Silvio, the whole time he existed as a character, was always a caricature. So it's in line with the character of Silvio. Yes, maybe in the later seasons of The Sopranos, Silvio was a little less stereotypical because he got some more screen time and he got to spend more time with Tony. But even in the later seasons, he's still pretty stereotypical. So it's not like Silvio has like this nuance to his character that the new actor didn't portray or something like that. He's just meant to play Silvio in one film, and he does an excellent job of it. Paulie, Pussy, and Silvio, they're all meant to be older guys that happen to now be under Tony as Tony becomes the boss in the early seasons of The Sopranos. Their arc in the show, especially Paulie, you can see, they're all dealing with him being younger than them. And Silvio, Paulie, and Pussy all remember how it was like before Tony was boss. Silvio also has other aspects to his character in The Sopranos that make him seem more old-fashioned than Tony. His complaint about Columbus Day, very old-fashioned. The fact that he was very upset about that, about Italian heritage, etc. And people also mention there's an episode in The Sopranos where Tony or Silvio talk about how they did something when they were younger together. But when they did that thing, whatever that episode was, I don't remember what it was, but whatever they did, when they did it, Silvio was never the same age as Tony when whatever they did, the memory of what it was. He was never the same age as him. But, he was still hanging out with Silvio. See, what I think happened is that the intention behind Silvio, Paulie, and Pussy in The Sopranos is that they should have picked older actors to play Pussy and Silvio in The Sopranos. But they screwed up, and so they wanted Silvio to seem way older than Tony in The Sopranos. Same thing with Pussy. But since they weren't super way older, they had to retroactively make these references to explain to the audience that, in fact, they are supposed to be older. They're meant to be older than James Gandolfini playing Tony in The Sopranos. So they kind of screwed up the ages of the actors. But in TV shows, not everything needs to be super accurate to a T. So what I'm trying to say is that the Sopranos fans are overanalyzing certain aspects of The Many Saints of Newark, and they're letting these aspects pretty much ruin the movie for them, and then they say the film is trash. What's cool about The Many Saints of Newark is that it reconfirms that Silvio and Pussy were always meant to be older than Tony. It's not a mistake, it's how it was always intended. The problem is that they should have picked older actors to play them in the original Sopranos. But anyway, now let's talk about Pussy. People think that the character of Pussy, who became Tony's good friend when he got older, people think he's not supposed to be this old in The Many Saints of Newark. People also think that Pussy's supposed to be Tony's age. But there's an episode of The Sopranos where Pussy was AJ's sponsor in the episode, and listen to what Pussy says to AJ.
You know, you see your parents as these great big dictators, these disciplinarians. But I know your dad from the time he was younger than you.
Pussy says to AJ, I knew your dad when he was younger than you are. So however old AJ is here, I don't know. 13, I don't know. But Pussy confirms that he knew Tony when he was younger than AJ's age here. So this would confirm that Pussy is older than Tony, which would also make sense why he's so much older than him in the Many Saints movie. I don't know where people got this idea that Pussy and Silvio are supposed to be the same age as Tony. Maybe because people feel like Silvio and Tony have similar old-fashioned Italian mannerisms, and like Tony does reference the 70s sometimes. Like when he had that meeting with Phil, when he yells at him and he says,
You'll give me what I tell you to give me.
Oh, Tony, come on, take it easy, take it easy.
Fuck that. This ain't the 70s. And I'm not a kid.
this ain't the 70s and I'm not a kid anymore. Yes, because in the 70s, Tony would have been a teenager, but especially to the way they talk and stuff, someone who is in their late teens in the 70s is still a kid, even though it's a young adult. In their culture, someone who's still in their 20s or in their 30s is still a kid. Even though Tony was a young adult in the 70s, the older people, like Phil, Pussy, Silvio, etc., like when Silvio says, I knew you since you were a kid, Tone, they still viewed Tony as a kid in the 70s. So it all adds up. Is it perfect? No. Could the actor who played Silvio and Pussy have been a little younger? Yes. That would have made a little more sense. But it still makes sense from a storyline perspective. Don't get focused on the ages of the actors in The Sopranos. I think it just seems as if, when you're watching The Sopranos, it seems as if Tony is the same age as Silvio and Pussy and Paulie, like they're from the same generation. It gives off that vibe because they all have such a close connection with one another, like they're all buddies, right? In crime or whatever. But that's just like the vibes they have with one another. They did grow up with each other, but they just grew up with each other from different ages, from different generations. They're not part of the same generation. But at this point, when Tony gets older in The Sopranos, when he's like in his 40s or whatever, playing this character, at this point, he has more in common with the ages of Silvio, Paulie, and Pussy than people of his age, because he grew up with the mafia, because he grew up hanging out with them. So hanging out with them when he was younger, at this point, he is kind of part of their generation, even though he technically isn't. Tony was always younger than all of them. One last thing to talk about with Silvio. Although I think The Many Saints in Newark is attempting to really reestablish the fact that Silvio was always meant to be older than Tony, which I think is a cool idea, the film does make a reference to The Sopranos when the famous scene where Silvio is lying to Tony in Tony's basement. Silvio says to Tony,
Timeline got fucked up.
the timeline got all fucked up, which is interesting because I think that's referencing Silvio's age in the Many Saints movie, because that scene where Silvio is lying to Tony is exactly what he does to Tony in Many Saints. The scene where Silvio goes to the door and Silvio lies to Tony and says that Dickie is not there. That is also Silvio lying. That scene in Many Saints shows that Silvio lied to Tony twice. So Silvio saying the timeline got all fucked up has now become transferred to Silvio's timeline of his age being always fucked up. But now the film Many Saints is trying to correct that by showing you the proper age that Silvio was always meant to be. Another complaint about Silvio in Many Saints is that he wears a hairpiece, that he's balding. And people think that Silvio in The Sopranos never wore a hairpiece. Yes, this is actually a big complaint by Sopranos fans, surprisingly. People think it's stupid. And I don't get these complaints. I think Silvio having a hairpiece in Many Saints is a reference to Ralphie. When Ralphie died in The Sopranos, Christopher takes off his wig, and he's very surprised. The whole time you saw Ralphie, the whole show, you never thought he wore a wig. So I think it's a reference to what happened with Ralphie after Ralphie died in The Sopranos. Besides, Silvio's haircut in the original Sopranos was always way too perfect looking. I could possibly believe that it's a wig, especially since he's an older man. And you know, as men get older, they frickin' lose their hair, so it's not like it's unbelievable or something. Now to talk about what I loved about Many Saints. I loved the actors playing the younger characters from The Sopranos. Livia, Junior, Tony, Pussy, I mean all of them, Paulie. They were all awesome portraying the younger versions of these characters. They all had their mannerisms down, and it was charming to see them again. Now to talk about the other thing I loved the most from Many Saints is the opening scene, the graveyard scene. I loved this opening. This opening is amazing. So they slowly pan through these gravestones, and you can hear people mumbling from the afterlife, because they're stuck. You see, I'm very spiritual, so I'm going to tell you all how it is. When you become a ghost, you are stuck there, in purgatory, basically. They're mumbling at their graves like they're not in heaven. They're stuck there. The opening scene shows that. And then the coolest part is that the film, in many times, is narrated by Christopher from beyond the grave. It's one of the coolest aspects of The Many Saints in Newark. We see Christopher's gravestone and the year he died, 2007, when Tony killed him. Spoilers, huh. It's important to know, why is it Christopher narrating the Many Saints movie? Because the Many Saints movie is Christopher's movie. When Christopher was alive, he struggled to become a filmmaker. He worked on the film Cleaver that they saw in The Sopranos. And in the film Cleaver, there was an actor who was being a parody of Tony and the other characters, of his life experiences with them. So now it's the same thing again. Christopher is making yet another movie about Tony's life, about all the other people he knew in his life. So it's Cleaver all over again, like a prequel to Cleaver, you know? So basically, Christopher narrating the past to us is him reflecting on the past. Something about how when you die, you're able to see everything that happened from the past, your present, and what the future will be as well. So he's reflecting on his life and how he's in hell now. And he's reflecting about how was it that Tony was able to convince him to keep staying in the mafia. And what he's slowly realizing in the afterlife, as he's pondering, like the other tombstones were, he's pondering to himself, why did I let him do this to me? The more he ponders, the more he's going to be able to forgive himself and apologize for what he did. And then maybe then he can ascend into heaven to repent for his sins, to repent for what he's done. Him realizing what a piece of shit Tony was to him and how he made a mistake by following Tony instead of leaving the mafia, becoming a filmmaker, doing all that other shit. So that's what Christopher's doing as he's narrating and basically showing us what happened. This is how Tony became who he became. Because in The Sopranos, we saw how Christopher became what he became because of Tony. But the Many Saints movie is showing how Tony was influenced by Dickie, who was Christopher's father. So this is more of a close connection between Tony, Christopher's dad, and Christopher. How they're all entwined, as Tony said in the original Sopranos.
Our businesses are all entwined. You gotta pick your battle.
And I will end this review with this really creepy and eerie moment that no one ever noticed from the intro to Many Saints. In the graveyard scene, Rewatch it again. You guys see the bulldozer in the background? It moves for like a couple of seconds and then it stops. There's a random bulldozer in the graveyard, right? There's no one there. So the frickin' bulldozer stops, and then you see a black shadowy figure walking past the graves in the background. And then as soon as that black figure walks right past Christopher's gravestone, Christopher then starts to talk. Because you know who that black figure is in the background? That's the ghost of Christopher. That bulldozer that moved for a couple of seconds in the graveyard scene is not supposed to be moving. His ghost is moving it because there's no one there in the graveyard. The way the figure moves, it moves in such a way that it looks like how ghosts move on video cameras. When people video capture ghosts on film, that's how they move. They move with like this weird mist or whatever to how they look. So that's why it looks like that. People didn't notice that in the intro because people hate this fucking film. So why a bulldozer? How is this a reference to Christopher? Well, remember the episode where Christopher was using a bulldozer at night? This is when he was with Tony, after they were burying the body of Ralphie. And Christopher was trying to dig a hole with the bulldozer, with Tony, at night. So Christopher used the bulldozer in The Sopranos, and now he's using it again as a ghost. It also ties to Ralphie, because that's after Ralphie died, he used a bulldozer. Now after he dies, he's also still using a bulldozer. And you see, when you're a ghost and you've done bad things on Earth, you're forced to endlessly repeat your sins over and over again in an endless loop for all eternity. Unless you try to find the light and pray to find Jesus, then you're stuck there in an endless loop. So you have to keep repeating what you did, the mistakes you did over and over again in the afterlife. This explains the thing with Christopher and the bulldozer, because Christopher did bad things in The Sopranos, and so did Tony. The finale to The Sopranos, getting into that now, Tony walks into the restaurant and he sees himself. This is because Tony died at the beginning of the episode. So now he's forced to rewatch his death over and over and over and over and over again. This is why it's filmed that way, that when Tony walks into the diner, he's looking, and then the film shows Tony just sitting there, because Tony's ghost is watching him. He's forced to rewatch his demise over and over again. This is to teach Tony a lesson that eventually, hopefully, he realizes what kind of mistakes he made in his life, and that he should turn his life to Jesus so that his soul can be saved. Otherwise, he's just going to be tortured for all eternity by being forced to relive and rewatch all the horrible things and bad things he did on Earth to other people. So anyway, this is my review of The Many Saints in Newark. I think it's a pretty good movie. Is it a great movie? I don't know. No, probably not. Is it a good movie? Hell yeah, it's a good movie. And it's overhated. It doesn't suck. It doesn't ruin The Sopranos. It honors The Sopranos. It's a good movie. There. I said my piece. And if you don't like it, shut the fuck up!
Shut the fuck up!